Welcome everyone to Rich Talks BS. I'm Rich. Week 12 of the NFL has just passed and is known as the longest week in NFL history, starting from last Thursday afternoon and ending on this Wednesday evening. So we start with Thursday afternoon game. Texans and Lions. Texans 41, Lions 25. Deshaun Watson had 318 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, also had 8 rushing attempts for 24 yards. Duke Johnson had 9 rushing attempts for 37 yards, also brought in 4 receptions, 43 yards, and a touchdown. Fuller had 6 catches for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. Brandon Cooks with 5 catches, 85 yards, and CJ Prosise with the other touchdown. JJ Watt had an interception for a 19-yard touchdown. Great pick 6 for him. Tyrell Adams had 17 total tackles, and the team had 4 sacks. Stafford had 295 passing yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Adrian Peterson with 15 rushing attempts, 55 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Kerryon Johnson with 11 attempts, 46 yards. He also brought in 4 catches for 52 yards. They had 109 rushing yards as a team. And Kerryon Johnson also had a fumble loss. TJ Hockenson had 5 catches for 89 yards. Marvin Jones had 6 catches for 48 yards. And Sanu had the other touchdown. This game put Watson past Unitas and Peyton for the 4th most passing touchdowns in a player's first 50 career games in NFL history. Deshaun Watson's still having a good career despite the record that they have now and the season that they're having. But they've also had their losses against teams who right now currently hold playoff spots in the AFC. So it's not like he's playing against bad teams, but he's playing against some good teams. So they had a pretty tough schedule this year, and he's still having a good year and a good career. Lions have lost 4 of the last 5 games by 10 or more points. They're getting behind, they're falling behind, and they're staying behind. It's just all coming from the coach, coming from the play that the way that they're playing, slow and steady, which the NFL nowadays is fast, up pace, and they just need to catch up with the times. Peterson joined Marcus Allen as the only running backs at the age of 35 and older with 2 rushing touchdowns on Thanksgiving. Going back to the Lions coaching, also they fired Matt Patricia after 3 seasons. He's an former assistant of Belichick, and all of Belichick's assistants have losing records. They just can't get it together outside of New England. This game was one-sided. The Texans, like I said, they're not having good games against teams that are in the playoffs, but other teams that are not in the playoff picture or below 500, they're having pretty good games. Next game was the Thursday afternoon game. Washington football team, Dallas Cowboys. Washington 41, Cowboys 16. Alex Smith had 149 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Antonio Gibson had 20 attempts, 115 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He also brought in 5 catches and 21 yards. Peyton Barber had 11 attempts, 57 yards. They had 182 rushing yards as a team. Terry McLaurin had 7 catches for 92 yards. Logan Thomas had a touchdown. They had 3 sacks in this game and the 1 pick. Montez Sweat actually had the interception in the 4th quarter that kind of put the game away also. Dalton had 215 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He also had 3 rushing attempts for 17 yards. Elliott had 10 rushing attempts for 32 yards, also a fumble loss, and they only had 60 rushing yards as a team. With Elliott's 1 fumble loss, that's his 5th this season, and he's only had 5 in the previous 4 seasons altogether. Cooper had 6 catches for 112 yards catching and 1 touchdown. Gallup had 6 catches for 41 yards. Cowboys had 65 total tackles, meaning Washington was just, on a roll. They're staying on the field, running a lot of plays with all these tackles, and they also had 3 sacks. Jalen Smith had an interception that he almost scored on, but he was stopped. He was run down by McLaurin. Gibson is the first rookie with 3 rushing touchdowns on Thanksgiving. The win for Washington gives them 2 wins in the same season against the same team since 2012. Cowboys have allowed 20 more points in each of the 11 games this season. Cowboys are still, struggling. In my opinion, Dalton shouldn't have started. They still should have started Gilbert. He had a good game the previous week. They seemed more in sync. They had a little bit more chemistry. Dalton's still making bad decisions, and it's just a rough year for the Cowboys in general. Next, we got the Giants and Bengals. Giants 19, Bengals 17. Daniel Jones had 213 yards passing. He got injured in the third quarter, so he was taken out. Colt McCoy came in and threw for 31 yards. Wayne Gallman had 24 rushing attempts on 94 yards and 1 touchdown. They had 142 rushing yards as a team. Evan Ingram had 6 catches for 129 yards, and he also had a fumble loss. Sterling Shepard had 7 catches for 64 yards. Graham Gano was 4 for 4 from field goals, and his longest was 49. Brandon Allen had 136 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and he also had a fumble loss. Bernard had 8 rushing attempts for 32 yards. They only rushed for 40 yards as a team. T. Higgins had 5 catches for 44 yards and 1 touchdown. Bengals had 71 total tackles, just showing that the Giants were running a lot of plays. They were all over the field. Despite the score being 19-17, the Giants should have had more. They should have won by more, especially with the Bengals and not having their rookie quarterback, who got hurt a couple of weeks ago. And Bengals were just struggling. The Bengals have 155 total yards, which is the fewest since Week 9 in 2017. Going back to Jones and and his injury in the third quarter, he did avoid a major hamstring injury. So depending on how he moves around, since then, last couple of days, a few days coming up, will determine if he plays against the Seahawks on Sunday. Browns, Jaguars. Browns 27, Jaguars 25. Baker Mayfield had 258 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Nick Chubb had 19 rushing attempts, 144 yards, and a touchdown. He also brought in 3 catches for 32 yards. Hunt had 10 attempts for 62 yards, and they had 207 rushing yards as a team. Landry had 8 catches for 143 yards and 1 touchdown. Hooper had the other touchdown. Mike Glennon had 235 passing yards for 2 touchdowns. James Robinson had 22 rushing attempts for 128 yards and 1 touchdown. He also brought in 5 catches for 31 yards. They had 140 rushing yards as a team. Colin Johnson had 4 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Eifert had 1 touchdown. The Browns stopped the Jags on the 2-point attempt at the end of the game to tie it, which gave them the win. This was a pretty decent game. It was a pretty high scoring game considered what the Jags have been doing all year. And the Browns, which they should have won by more than that, especially with the run game. They have the best run game and rushing offense in the league. They're just all over the place with this 2-headed monsters in the backfield. Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb are just eating up the rushing yards, and it's hard for teams to stop them. So if they can get into the playoffs and stay in the playoffs, they could cause a little trouble, but they won't go too far. Chubb now has rushed for 100 or more yards for the 16th time in his career. That's passing Hall of Fame Jim Brown among Cleveland players in the first 3 seasons. Jags have allowed 24 more points in 10 straight games. Titans, Colts. Titans 45, Colts 26. Tannehill had 221 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and a rushing touchdown. Derrick Henry had 27 rushing attempts for 178 yards and 3 touchdowns. They had 229 rushing yards as a team. A.J. Brown brought in 4 catches for 98 yards and 1 touchdown. Phillip Rivers had 295 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Hines had 10 rushing attempts for 29 yards. He also brought in 8 catches for 66 yards. Jacoby Brissett also had 2 rushing touchdowns. They only had 56 rushing yards as a team. T.Y. Hilton brought in 4 catches for 81 yards and 1 touchdown. Trey Burton had the other touchdown. Darius Leonard had 14 total tackles and 1 sack. They had 63 total tackles. This game, was pretty high scoring. Well, more on the Titans' part than the Colts, but the Titans were just dominating. The Colts did not look like the Colts of the past few weeks. The defense didn't look like what they should have looked like. The way they've been stopping the run game past few weeks with these teams that have good running backs, but then again, they weren't going up against Derrick Henry type running back either. Derrick Henry in the first half became the 5th player in the last 30 seasons with 130 more rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. He's also rushed for more than 100 yards in 8 straight road games, tying the 2nd longest streak. He also leads the league with 1,257 rushing yards. They're the second in rushing yards as a team, right behind the Cleveland Browns. They're not that far behind Cleveland in rush offense, but they're still doing pretty good. King Henry is just running all over the place. He's just doing it, by himself, which is amazing. The Titans needed this win. The Colts didn't need to lose the way they did. They played, like I said, they weren't playing like they have in the last few weeks. So hopefully they pick it back up. They can make that playoff run and show what they really can do. Raiders-Falcons. Raiders 6, Falcons 43. Carr had 215 yards passing, 1 interception, and he had 3 fumble losses. Jacobs rushed for 7 attempts on 27 yards, and he also lost a fumble. They only have 40 rushing yards as a team. Hunter Renfrow had 7 catches for 73 yards. The Raiders as a team had 5 fumbles, and they lost 4 of them. Nicholas Morrow and Jeff Heath had 10 total tackles, and they were all over the place. They were all over the place, and they were doing what they needed to do as a defense. But it just wasn't enough for the Falcons to stop the Falcons, especially with allowing 43 points, allowing the Falcons to score 43 points. Matt Ryan had 185 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Ito Smith had 12 rushing attempts for 65 yards and 1 touchdown. Brian Hill had 13 rushing attempts for 55 yards. They rushed 125 yards as a team. Calvin Ridley had 6 catches for 50 yards, 1 touchdown. Deion Jones had the pick 6, went back for 67 yards. Koo was 5 for 5 from field goals, and 54 was his longest. The Falcons defense had 5 or more takeaways and 5 or more sacks since week 12 of 2002. Carr's fumble loss in the 4th quarter was his 31st, and was his 31st since being drafted in 2014. That's the most in the NFL in that span. And Raiders still haven't won on the road against the Falcons since 1997. Falcons looked crazy amazing in this game. They were rolling. The defense was rolling, especially stopping this Raiders team, which has kind of been off and on, but more on the on side. For them to keep the Raiders to 6 points was pretty good. But they kind of didn't need this win. They need to, focus on the draft, focus on next season. They don't want to hurt their chances in being high on the draft board, which, they kind of overdid it a little bit, but, it was still a good win for the Falcons. They needed some kind of momentum. They needed some kind of positivity, after the season that they've been having. And, it was just pretty good. Chargers-Bills. Chargers 17, Bills 27. Herbert had 316 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Austin Eckler, his first game back, he had 14 rushing attempts for 44 yards. He also led the receivers with 11 catches and 85 yards. Hunter Henry had 7 catches for 85 yards. They had 3 sacks as a team. Josh Allen had 157 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Beasley also was 1 for 1, had 20 yards and passing touchdown to Gabriel Davis. Singletary had 11 rushing attempts for 82 yards. He also brought in 3 catches for 20 yards. They rushed for 172 yards as a team. Gabriel Davis had 3 catches for 79 yards and 1 touchdown. Stephon Diggs had 7 catches for 39 yards. A.J. Klein had 14 total tackles and 1.5 sacks. They had 77 total tackles as a team and 2 sacks. 77 total tackles. The Chargers were running a lot of plays. They just couldn't do anything with it. They couldn't score. They couldn't get the first down when they needed to. This Bills team is starting to get better and better at the right time. They're trying to make a run into the playoffs. They're trying to get into the playoffs, make that run. They're trying to, get back into how they were last season. They look good. They got a pretty good remaining schedule coming up, especially one against the Steelers, which I think they could actually take away that win against the Steelers, but we'll see what happens. Like I said, the Bills, they're on the right foot. They got the momentum at the right time, especially coming into the later of the season. Herbert joins Mahomes as the only players with 3,000 or more passing yards in the first 10 starts. Also ties Andrew Luck for most games with 300 or more passing yards by a rookie with 6. Bills have 20 or more first downs in each of their first 11 games. And that's the first time in team history that they've done that. Allen has one or more passing touchdowns, 1 or more rushing touchdowns for 15 times since being drafted in 2015. That's the most in the NFL in that span. Panthers, Vikings. Panthers 27, Vikings 28. Bridgewater had 267 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Mike Davis had 15 rushing attempts for 55 yards. They had 107 rushing yards as a team. Robbie Anderson had 4 catches for 94 yards and 1 touchdown. Samuel had 5 catches for 72 yards. Moore had 4 catches for 61 yards. Jeremy Chin had 13 total tackles and 2 fumble recovers for touchdowns. They had 71 total tackles as a team and 2 sacks. Jeremy Chin, his 2 fumble recoveries were on back-to-back plays and got 2 scores in 10 seconds, which was pretty crazy. And it was good for the Panthers because they were behind at that point and they were coming back. Kirk Cousins had 307 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. He also had 3 rushing attempts for 19 yards and a fumble loss. Dalvin Cook had 18 rushing attempts for 61 yards. He also brought in 4 catches for 21 yards. He also had a fumble loss. They had 96 rushing yards as a team. Johnson had 7 catches for 74 yards. Jefferson had 7 catches for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. Rudolph has 7 catches for 68 yards, and Chad Beebe has 7 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown, and he also had a fumble loss. They had 3 fumbles, and they lost all 3 of them as a team. Panthers were good on the comeback. They were down. They were catching the momentum to come back, and it just came down to the last-minute field goal. And they missed the game-winning field goal, actually. They missed the game-winning field goal from 54 yards. Panthers are still, they're looking good. Bridgewater looked good coming back. And they just missing a few more pieces to actually start winning games. Vikings is not that bad of a team, but they're not really a good team either. So they were kind of like almost evenly matched. But Vikings came out with the win. Cardinals, Patriots. Cardinals 17, Patriots 20. Kyler Murray had 170 passing yards and 1 interception. He had 5 rushing attempts for 31 yards. Drake had 22 rushing attempts for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also brought in 3 catches for 15 yards. They had 138 rushing yards as a team. DeAndre Hopkins had 5 catches for 55 yards. Isabella had 4 catches for 33 yards. They had 3 sacks and 2 interceptions as a team. Cam Newton had 84 passing yards, 2 interceptions. He also ran for 9 attempts for 46 yards. Damian Harris had 14 rushing attempts for 47 yards. White had 2 touchdowns. They had 110 rushing yards as a team. Jacoby Myers had 5 catches for 52 yards. And they had 74 total tackles as a team with 2 sacks and 1 interception. Cam's 84 passing yards was career low, as well as a passer rating of 23.6. Stephon Gilmore's defense was good. He's only allowed more than 100 or more yards receiving in coverage only once in his career. They put him on Hopkins. He kept Hopkins on lock pretty much. Like I said, 55 yards. Hopkins is like, if not the best receiver, one of the best receivers in the league. And to stop him like that was some pretty good defense. Stephon Gilmore is really good in the coverage, really, one of the best corners in the league. And this team is getting pretty good. They're starting to catch the momentum also. They're on the right track to start being good again. As far as the Cardinals are on downhill right now. Kyler Murray is not playing like he's been playing, especially after the Hail Murray, and he's just not being himself. Kyler, you have to be yourself. Keep running the ball, keep with the RPOs. You're good. You're a very good, quarterback. You were, in my opinion, in the MVP hunt. You're in MVP conversations. After these last 2 games, you're kind of falling out of it. You're in the same situation as, like I said about Russell Wilson before. I kind of had Russell Wilson in the MVP conversation, and he was starting to look like he was going to actually, play well enough to become the MVP. He was having one of his best seasons, and then he had 2 games where he just fell off, which to me put him out of that MVP conversation. These 2 games also put you out of the MVP conversation, which in my opinion, shouldn't have happened. Next game, you got to be back on it. You got to rush more. You got to use what you have, and you're good. You've got an arm, you got the feet, you got the legs. Use them. You can't keep losing like this, especially this close to the end of the season and trying to get into the playoffs. Dolphins, Jets. Dolphins 20, Jets 3. Fitzpatrick had 257 passing yards on 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Washington had 13 rushing attempts for 49 yards. They rushed for 104 yards as a team. Devontae Parker had 8 catches for 119 yards. Gesicki and Adam Shaheen had 1 touchdown each. They had 4 fumbles and lost 2 of them as a team. Darnold had 197 passing yards on 2 interceptions. Frank Gore rushed 18 rushing attempts for 74 yards. They had 87 rushing yards as a team. Perriman had 4 catches, 79 yards. Denzel Mims had 4 catches, 67 yards. The Dolphins have held the Jets to 3 or fewer points both games this season. Jets are 0-10. The Dolphins, instead of sticking with Tua, went back to Fitzpatrick, which, you're playing the Jets anyway, so you kind of didn't want to risk Tua, but it was an interesting, decision to put Fitzpatrick back in, and it'll be interesting to see if they're going to actually stick with Fitzpatrick or put Tua back into the lineup. It was a good game for the Dolphins. Of course, the Jets are not really trying to play too hard. They're still trying to go for that number 1 spot in the draft. They want that number 1 pick. They're still trying to go after Trevor Lawrence, which, again, in my opinion, Trevor Lawrence is not your answer. He's not the type of quarterback that you guys need. He's a little bit too mobile for your system. You need someone who's going to sit in the pocket all day and air it out. But we'll see what happens. 49ers Rams. 49ers 23, Rams 20. Nick Mullins had 252 passing yards and 1 interception. Monster had 16 rushing attempts, 43 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 fumble loss. Jeffrey Wilson also had 12 rushing attempts for 43 yards. They rushed for 115 yards as a team. Deebo Samuel had 11 catches for 133 yards. They had 3 fumbles and lost 2 of them as a team. Sherman, hasn't been Richard Sherman, but in this game he kind of was. He had 7 total tackles and 1 interception. Jared Goff had 198 passing yards, 2 interceptions. He also had 5 rushing attempts for 11 yards and a fumble loss. Cam Akers had 9 rushing attempts for 84 yards and 1 touchdown. Darrell Henderson had 10 rushing attempts for 19 yards. They rushed for 126 yards as a team. Woods had 7 catches for 80 yards. Josh Reynolds had 5 catches for 40 yards. They had 2 fumbles and lost both fumbles as a team. Robbie Gould kicked the game-winning field goal at the end. It was a 42-yard field goal. The Rams were already kind of worried going into the game because they feel like for some reason the Niners have their number. The Rams is on paper is totally the best team over the 49ers, especially with their injuries. They had a lot of injuries. They got a lot of people out, and the 49ers are still playing pretty good. They're not like playing their worst. They're not the worst team in the league, but they're also not, in the hunt to win their division or in the hunt to make the playoffs. And for the 49ers to still, keep the Rams down and beat the Rams at the way they did, the game-winning field goal was just the dagger, And like I said, the Rams already felt like the 49ers have their number. I think they kind of let that play in their head. They let that, get the best of them. And the 49ers had that momentum to go in and go ahead and finish off the Rams. The Saints-Broncos. Saints 31, Broncos 3. Taysom Hill had 78 passing yards and 1 interception. He had 10 rushing attempts for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns. Murray had 19 rushing attempts for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kamara had 11 rushing attempts for 54 yards. They had 229 rushing yards as a team. Michael Thomas had 4 catches for 50 yards. Hinton, the practice squad receiver who had to come in and play quarterback because the Broncos had no quarterback to start and play in this game, was 1 for 9, 13 passing yards, and 2 interceptions. His 1 completion came in the 3rd quarter. Royce Freeman had 8 rushing attempts for 50 yards. Melvin Gordon had 12 rushing attempts for 31 yards. They rushed for 100 yards as a team. Noah Fant, which was the recipient of the 1 catch. He had the 1 catch for 13 yards. They also had 3 sacks. Hinton, like I said, was his first completion was in the 3rd quarter. He was the first player with 0 completions in the first half since Tim Tebow in 2011. Hill's the 3rd player in the Super Bowl era with 500 passing yards, 500 more passing yards, 500 more rushing yards, and 200 more receiving yards. Broncos have now have 26 giveaways this season, which is the most in the NFL after having 16 giveaways in 2019. The Broncos, went to the league and tried to have this game, rescheduled or pushed back, and the league denied it, which was kind of crazy because we had a game that was pushed back 4 times, but it kind of looks like hey, you guys are not in any way, shape, or form to make the playoffs, so play with what you have. And they did, and it was one of their worst games ever. I'm kind of surprised with the 3 points, especially with how the Saints have been playing. Their defense is really good. Taysom Hill is just kind of feel like he's just winging it. His passing yards is kind of bad, but he's also not that type of quarterback. The 2 rushing touchdowns was pretty good. He still hasn't had a passing touchdown, which they're getting by with Taysom Hill. They're doing what needs to be done until Drew Brees comes back. Chiefs, Buccaneers. Chiefs 27, Bucks 24. Mahomes threw for 462 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had 4 rushing attempts for 28 yards and 1 fumble loss. Edwards-Helaire had 11 rushing attempts for 37 yards. They had 87 rushing yards as a team. Tyreek Hill, 13 catches, 269 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Travis Kelce had 8 catches for 82 yards. Brady had 345 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Jones had 9 rushing attempts for 66 yards. He also had 1 catch for 37 yards, and that was for a touchdown. They had 75 rushing yards as a team. Gronkowski had 6 catches for 106 yards. Godwin had 8 catches for 97 yards. Mike Evans had 3 catches and 2 touchdowns. Brady's 14th time since turning 41 to have 3 or more passing touchdowns in a game. The rest of the NFL has combined for 7 such games all time. Mahomes now has 30 passing touchdowns and 2 interceptions this season for the best touchdown and interception ratio in a season in NFL history. Tyreek Hill became the first player in the last 30 seasons with 7 or more catches and 200 more receiving yards in a single quarter. All of this came in the first quarter. The first quarter just blew it wide open. The Chiefs were more prepared. Of course, they're way more prepared than the Bucs, especially with Brady's being first year with the Bucs. Mahomes already knows his offense. Brady is still learning his offense, but it's kind of coming down to who is it? Is it Brady or is it the coach? Who's really to blame here? It's kind of hard to tell. Like I said, Brady's still learning the system. The system should have been built around Brady instead of around your own methods. Having a quarterback like Brady, it's kind of like you should let him do what he want to do, but at the same time, you think and you want to have a system that works, and having a player like Brady backing it up makes it even better. Mahomes is going crazy right now. He's, to me, the clear choice for MVP. The Chiefs, to me, are on a clear path to the Super Bowl. Going for another Super Bowl, going for a back-to-back Super Bowl is going to be crazy. Tyreek Hill leads all receivers this season, and then Travis Kelce is number 2 in receivers also. So having those 2 guys is just going to make it even better, make it a little bit more easier for this Chiefs team. They need a little bit more help in the rush, but as long as they can stay ahead, as long as, if it turns into a shootout, they're going to stay ahead in the shootout, and they're just going to keep winning. Bears, Packers. Bears 25, Packers 41. This was the Sunday night game. Trubisky had 242 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He also had 3 fumbles and lost 1 of them. Montgomery had 11 rushing attempts for 103 yards. He also had 5 catches for 40 yards and 1 touchdown. They had 122 rushing yards as a team. Robinson had 8 catches for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers had 211 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. Aaron Jones, 17 rushing attempts for 90 yards. Jamal Williams had 17 rushing attempts for 73 yards and 1 touchdown. Tonyan had 5 catches for 67 yards and 1 touchdown. Devontae Adams had 6 catches for 61 yards and 1 touchdown. The Bears have allowed 40 or more points for the first time since Week 16 of 2016. This Bears team is still going down. They're still, they're losing it. The quarterback is just, and that's including Nick Foles. The quarterback is just not running this team. This team is just running itself, and it's kind of like a chicken with its head cut off. You know, um, I'm surprised the rush was as high as it was, but then again, Packers are kind of having trouble with stopping running backs also. Packers look good. Aaron Rodgers look good. He's on a roll. He's starting to get into that momentum of getting into the playoffs. They're gonna get into the playoffs. They're winning. They're gonna win their division, and he's looking for another playoff run. He's looking for another ring. He's getting a little bit older, so it's getting close to that time to where he wants to ride off into the sunset. I'm not saying if he wins it this year, he's gonna retire, but he's still looking to end his career on a good note. Um, like I said, Aaron Rodgers, he's focused. You can see it. But the 211 passing yards is not really going to cut it. Going up against the Saints, you're going to have to air it out. If you make it to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to air it out, because if you get to the Super Bowl, most likely you're going to play the Chiefs. You're going to get into a shootout with Mahomes. If you can't pick it up a little bit more, Mahomes is just going to leave you in the dust. Like I said a little while ago, Mahomes is just on it. He's clear MVP this year, clear path to the Super Bowl. Packers could be on the same road, kind of a clear path to a Super Bowl, but not a Super Bowl win. You just need to be a little bit more prepared for it. The offense got to step it up a little bit more. Aaron Rodgers got to step it up a little bit more. He's got to air it out quite a bit. Seahawks, Eagles. Seahawks 23, Eagles 17. This was the Monday night game. Wilson had 230 passing yards, 1 touchdown. He also had 6 rushing attempts for 12 yards. Carson had 8 rushing attempts for 41 yards and 1 touchdown. Carlos Hyde had 15 rushing attempts for 22 yards. They had 76 rushing yards as a team. DK Metcalf, 10 catches, 177 yards. Carson Wentz had 215 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He also had 5 rushing attempts for 42 yards. Sanders had 6 rushing attempts for 15 yards. Goddard had 7 catches for 75 yards and 1 touchdown. Boston Scott had 5 catches for 40 yards, and Rodgers had 53 yards catching and 1 touchdown. Wentz extends his streak to 9 straight games with 3 or more sacks. And he also has 15 interceptions this season. Wilson just joined Peyton Manning as the only player in NFL history with 3,000 or more passing yards and 20 or more passing touchdowns in each of their first 9 seasons. The Seahawks are picking it back up. They had 2 bad games. They had 2 straight losses, and that next week they needed to get back on track. They got back on track. They're getting back on track. Russell Wilson is starting to pick his game back up. Everybody is starting to, pay attention to where they're at in the season. The season is starting to come to the end pretty soon, and it's starting to get, into the playoffs, starting to get playoff time. They want to make the playoffs. They want to win their division, which is, to me, the toughest division in the NFL. Beating this Eagles team was just, like a hop and skip down the trail. This Eagles team, something's got to happen. Whether it's Doug Peterson being out or benching Carson Wentz. I mean, you drafted a quarterback in the 2nd round for a reason, which I'm, kind of thinking as the backup plan to Carson Wentz, whether he got injured, season-ending injury, or if he was just having a bad season, which he's been having bad seasons of late anyway. Something's got to happen. If not one, both. Doug Peterson needs to go. Carson Wentz needs to sit down. It's Jalen Hurts' time. Hurts was already getting first team reps in practice before the game. It was all over, all over the reports. So everybody was kind of expecting Hurts to get more playing time, which he was only out there for 3 plays. And it's time for Jalen. You need something fresh. You need something new in the backfield, especially at the quarterback position. And he's that answer. He's very mobile. He's good on his feet. He can run. He can pass. It's time to put Jalen Hurts in. You do that, you know you might be able to win the division. Of course, the NFC East, the division is still up in the air. Um, you might not win the playoff game, but you're gonna at least win the division. And then your Wednesday afternoon game, Ravens Steelers. Ravens 14, Steelers 19. Um, Robert Griffin III, RG3 started the game. Came out a couple of times and came out for a couple of drives in the first half, and eventually was sat down in the fourth quarter. And then he had ice pack on his hamstring also, so it kind of looks like he was kind of hurting or kind of sore, or something was wrong there. So Trace McSorley was put in. He was 2 for 6, had 77 passing yards and 1 touchdown. He also had 3 rushing attempts for 16 yards. Griffin was 7 for 12 with 33 passing yards, 1 interception. He had 7 rushing attempts for 68 yards and a fumble loss. Justice Hill had 9 rushing attempts for 35 yards. Gus Edwards had 9 rushing attempts for 10 yards and 1 touchdown. They had 129 rushing yards as a team. Hollywood Brown, 4 catches, 85 yards, and 1 touchdown. Roethlisberger was 36 for 51 for 266 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Benny Snell had 16 rushing attempts for 60 yards. They rushed for 68 yards as a team. Ebron had 7 catches for 54 yards. Claypool had 6 catches for 52 yards. Deontay Johnson and Smith-Schuster both had 8 catches, and Juju had the 1 touchdown. Joe Hayden had the pick 6. The game started with the fumble, interception, which ended in pick 6. It was a crazy game. It was a pretty good game. The Ravens, for the most part, had most of their players on defense, which they're still considered one of the best defenses in the league. It was just, on the shoulders of the offense. You were already missing, you're already missing 2 running backs and your 2 star running backs with J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram. And then, not having your quarterback, it just made this offense look like it was nothing. Mark Andrews was out too, and it was very tough for this Ravens offense to actually keep up with the Steelers, especially with this defense of the Steelers. It was a good game. Both defenses looked good. Both defenses stepped up. It was just the Steelers' offense was a little bit more, well, it was a lot better than this Ravens offense. TJ Watt leads all linebackers with 45.5 sacks in the NFL since 2017. TJ Watt is a beast. He's arguably the best linebacker. To me, he's the best linebacker in the league. Ravens have 100 or more rushing yards in 34 straight games, which is the 3rd longest. The Steelers defense have allowed fewer than 20 points in 4 straight games. Steelers are still undefeated. They're looking good. It's just this offense, I don't think, is good enough to beat the Chiefs. They're gonna get the first round bye. They're gonna play the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. It's just, to me, it's gonna kind of be one-sided because this defense is, still having trouble with the rush. The Chiefs are trying to pick up the running game. They're starting to pick up a little bit more, over the past few weeks, leading into the playoffs, going deep into the playoffs, to the AFC Championship game. The rush of the Chiefs are just going to get better. With that running game getting better, the passing game is already incredible, best in the league. It's gonna turn into a shootout at first, and then the Chiefs are just gonna take it away. This this week again was the longest week in NFL history. Is starting to, kind of shape the playoffs. Teams are starting to pick up momentum, past couple weeks leading into the end of the season, and we'll see who actually can, hold on to it, and we'll see who can actually make a run into the playoffs. That's all the BS I have for this episode. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.